Chapter 6: Planning and Writing Your Documents. This chapter provides guidelines for planning a documentation project. These guidelines including a production of task lists for each of the 9 phases of the process. So in general, the planning and writing chapter will cover or will go through 9 phases that any documentation process will consist of. As we mentioned in the previous slide, this chapter explains the documentation process as a set of series of 9 phases. These phases start from the user analysis and build up till we get to the final phase, the 9th phase, which is the evaluation or the field evaluation after installing the software. In general, this chapter will give us some guidelines for developing a documentation plan. And when we talk about documentation plan consists of either development plan or management plan and something, and the documentation plan, including the plans for designing the document and managing the project. So any documentation plan, as we said, will consist of plan for designing the document and plan for managing the project. Documentation process phases. The documentation process consists of 9 phases. As we said before, or in general, the key to produce any quality document is to follow a process. This process consists of: first, start the project, where you identify the idea, perform the user analysis. That we completely studied that in chapter 5, and that will mean that we have to understand the user needs, what exactly the user environment, what type of document they need, and that depends on their goals. Second thing, design the documents, and we have to choose a task-oriented design based on their needs. Plan the documentation project, and here when we talk about documentation project, we say the plan to design and plan to manage the project. Write the first draft, which is the alpha draft, which is the first draft of the document. Conduct reviews and tests, and there is different type of reviews and tests we can conduct, either lab tests or field tests, and we have user reviews, manager reviews, the client reviews, and different type of reviews. Also revise and edit. After that, any comments we get from the reviews and the tests, we can conduct it or integrate it in our document and edit the document. After this phase, number 7, we'll end up having the final draft, which is the result for the previous 3 or 4 phases. But next, we will conduct a field evaluation phases while we evaluate the document in the field. Guidelines process phases. The key to produce a quality document is to follow a process. Processes in general vary depending on غالبا أي process بتعتمد على مجموعة من الفاكتورز. هون بهذا السلايد راح ننبه ل 3 factors. The first factor, the circumstances of how software is developed. الظروف اللي انبنى السوفتوير من خلالها. Second, the characteristics of the company. Each company has some constraints that forces on how the development will for the document. في كل document في لها sometimes constraints في لها rules تحكم how we build a document or how the process will go. Number 3, the degree of the user involvement. To what level the user was involved in the writing and in the project for the documentation. The documentation described here in this chapter follow 9 phases. Each phase built on the previous one. The first one is start the project. Writer should start by getting to know the computer software in questions, considering how the material should be adapted to the user needs. In general, the first thing we need to know, لازم نعرف او ناخذ معلومات. we have to gather information عن السوفت وير اللي احنا قاعدين بنحاول نبني الدوكيومنت له، بحيث انه نحاول نعرف how we can adapt it to the user needs. We have two types of documentation. Some documentation projects may be written by lone writers, but often projects are created in teams. هنا في عندنا نوعين من documentations. Either there's one single writer who writes the whole document, or there is a team of writers and editors who develop a document. Both the development teams and the writing teams work to develop software documentation. Now, the first type is development teams, and we sometimes call it the cross-functional team. Why we call it cross-functional team? Because this team develops the entire project and usually includes professionals with varied background and skills. mainly بنسميه cross functional لأنه بيحتوي على people or professional from different backgrounds and skills. The team might include managers, market and system analysts, programmers, developers, and documentation specialists. لاحظوا انه هذول التيم members هم عبارة عن people from different backgrounds and skills. The second thing اللي هم are a writing team. The writing team basically focus on publications, writing, editing, and testing a document. This might include managers, writers, editors, graphics designers, and testers. هون ايش الديفرنس between those two types؟ The first one, a development team or the cross-functional team. There is one only member in the documentation who in the team who is a writer. ففي عندي just only one writer or documentation specialist, okay, and they produce the whole project software. The second type, which is a writing team, those writing team, all the members focus on the writing, and all the people they work together in order to produce document. Here we produce the software with the document. Here we only focus on writing and publishing a document. Task list. During the documentation plan, you might need to create a task list. This list will consist of all the tasks that you want to perform during a documentation process. The task list will help you or give you the ability to tick off your accomplishment as you work. That means if you have a set of lists during the process, you can put a sign next to each list or next to each task to show if you are done with this task, or it's in progress, or you are not going to do this task. So it's like we are saying, well, we are going to do this and this. Sometimes we have to learn a new system or learn a new format along the way, or bring a new personnel. These are the kind of tasks that you might need to include in your task lists. Okay, so basically one of the tasks you might need to learn a new system, or learn a new format, or bring a new personnel, or study a new environment, something like this. Next slide present figure 6.1. 6.1 present a task list. This task list corresponds a task corresponding to the phases of the document production, from user analysis to conduct a field evaluation. Some of these tasks will be applied to your projects, some are not. You may need to add more. This table shows figure 6.1, which shows a task list for an online documentation project, or for developing a documentation project. This the table consists of set of tasks that the user or like the team need to perform during the documentation process. These tasks are divided into 6 weeks. Okay, Each one of the tasks next to the task shows who are the people involved to finish this task. For example, studying existing documents. This will be done by all the users or all the team members. Visit user site will be assigned to both of the manager and the writer. Research will be assigned to all and mainly to the client contact or the client user. These users are divided so it will reflect or correspond to the 9 phases. For example, the first set of tasks will consist of user analysis and studying the user. Next, after that will be also related, for example, to studying the environment of the user and surveying the users, studying the users. Then after that, we'll be starting with the initial draft, our first draft, reviewing and surveying, revising and editing. After that, we will go edit the document, revise and test the document, and we'll end up having the final draft of the document. After that, we will take the final draft to the evaluation phase or the field evaluation phase. So these tasks cover the 9 phases of the documentation process. Phase number 2, perform user analysis. In chapter 5, we already discussed all the things that we need to follow or all the guidelines that we need to follow when we perform the user analysis. During user analysis, we mean interviewing and observing the users in order to determine the user type and other elements related to workplace activities. In general, خلال user analysis بنركز على إنه first we have to know what type of document the user need to be produced or the user needed. For example, do they need tutorials, references, or procedures? Second type, what are the tasks that they need to perform in their workplace, their environment, their community, what kind of constraints the organization or community put on the documentation process. This helps to determine which program operation should be included in the program, which is what we mean task needs, and manuals and help documentation. Helps identify the table of contents for the manual also. If you want more information about the user analysis, you can go back to figure 6.7 and 6.8 from your text. Design the document. During this phase, writers apply the three types of the documents to the user needs. In general, they will go and try to check which one of the 3 types will be most suitable for the users, keeping in mind the user needs and documents are outlined and designed. During this phase, we will take or there will be some kind of decision that will be made. Decisions are made on what? What document forms or document type we will use? Do we need tutorials, procedures, or references as we mentioned earlier, as well as the type of product will be produced. If we chose, for example, tutorial, do we need help, training, guided tours, templates, and messages? What type of tutorial or what type of procedure or what type of reference that we need? The final decision that we will take on the document's outline and layout. What kind of pages, style, size, font, and language. Throughout the process, changes will be made as you test your document with the user and writers. Based on the users and writers' reviews and comments, some changes may be made to the layout or the type of the document or the design of the document. This slide shows the table of contents for 2 types of documents. First, the default document table of contents and task-oriented manual table of contents. If you look here, the default manual focuses on the menus of the program. For example, file menus, edit menu, format menu, print menu, image menu. So this type of document focuses exactly on the program features. The second one will focus on the user task and usage scenarios. Getting started, creating a basic calendar, working with images, customizing calendar. So here basically we focus on the task. We don't focus on the menu items or menu features. What are the main differences between الديفولت مانيوال and التاسك اورينتد مانيوال؟ ايش الديفرنسز او الاختلافات المهمه بين الديفولت مانيوال والتاسك اورينتد مانيوال؟ We can get this from the table of contents. اول difference, the default manual records the functions of all the menu items, commands and dialog boxes. وهذا اللي حكيناه انه بركز على المنيو items اللي هو لك الفايل منيو, edit menu, format menu and so on. This means it doesn't suggest learning. What do we mean by it doesn't suggest learning? That means it ignores, it doesn't show that the users move from beginning to advanced to activities. Okay, هنا إذا بنطلع if you go to the table of contents order like topics ما بتلاحظ إنه بيوريك إنه the user can go from its beginner to more advanced till we get to the complex topics. Just the order تبعهم based على how the menus are ordered. بينما التاسك oriented manual, they structure the information or they order the information according to the user task. Now, if you use any program, we start with getting started. Before we use it, we have to install it. So this is the first step. Then we have to start with the basic stuff. So now we structure or we order topic according to the way that the user use them or according to the user tasks. Operations are grouped according to how they would be used by the actual user. فإذا بنطلع على أول group, these kind of tasks related to how we create a basic calendar. These are set of tasks related how to work with the image. So we put them in groups. That means this kind of document, the task-oriented document, suggests growth of learning of program features. هذا بيتدرج لنا from the start till more advanced till we get to the complex topics while we using a document. Phase number 4, plan the documentation project and mainly write the project plan. You need to know how to write a project plan. It's a guide for others' activities. People use it to check deadlines and rules. لازم نتعلم كيف نكتب البروجكت بلان لأنه people بيستخدموه حتى يتأكدوا من الديدلاينز from their roles. Who is going to do this task? Who is going to check this task? As we have seen in the task list. Plans allow you to specify the manual and online help you identified during the design phase. Now, the documentation project includes two parts, the project plan and the design plan. هذول two types we call them a documentation plan. Now, what we mean by project plan? Project plan, it's a document that tells the resources, deadlines, and other information for managing a manual or help project. معناته البروجكت بلان هون بتركز على managing related أو management related tasks. You must describe the management aspects of your worksheet, schedule of draft tests, people and hardware resources, and time, page estimates. Review and test the plan before you go further or you are going further. Now المقصود هنا بهاي التاسك بنركز على انه نظهر الديدلاينز، الريسورسز، التايم بيج استيميتس حتى نقدر نعمل مانجمنت للبروجكت تبعنا. The second type, which is a design plan, also known as the content specification plan. describes what the manual will look like and what they will contain. This what we call it a content specification. From the term content specification, this is specify how the document content will look like. This type of plan includes a description of the user and what kind of task they will want to complete, a discussion of the documentation objectives, and a description of the content including the outline and the layout of the process. بنعيد الديزاين بلان هي عبارة عن a document that describe the design of a content and layout of pages of a manual on help system. Phase number 5, write the alpha draft. This draft can be either online or printed document. The first draft is the first complete draft. This will include all material such as text, graphics, indices, and other associated material. It should be tested, reviewed, and edited all according to the specification laid out in the documentation plan. هنا المقصود بالفيرست درافت هي أول نسخة كاملة من الدوكيومنت تحتوي على كل الماتيريال مثل التكست، الجرافيكس، الاندسيز and so on. Now when we want to test it we have to test it, review it, and our testing will be based على ايش؟ based على السبيسيفيكيشن اللي وضعناهم during planning process او بالdocumentation plan. احنا لما حكينا عن documentation plan حكينا عن documentation plan بتتكون من two types. في عندنا واحدة منهم اللي هي الكونتنت سبيسيفيكيشن. يعني بالكونتنت سبيسيفيكيشن بنحدد ايش السبيسيفيكيشن او ايش طبيعة الديزاين للدوكيومنت تبعنا. فناو لما بنيجي نعمل تيستينج للفيرست درافت بنتاكد هل الدوكيومنت ماتشز السبيسيفيكيشن او الديزاين اليمنتس اللي احنا حطيناهم بالدوكيومنتيشن بلان اور نوت. بالاونلاين هيلب سيستم البروسيس بتختلف لانه when we write we create links and interconnected relations among topics. مثل ما بنعرف اي اونلاين هيلب سيستم في عندنا هايبر لينكس او في عندنا لينكس، فاحنا لما بدنا نعمل تيست we have to test all these links. ففي عندنا programs بنسميهم الهيلبر او الهيلب كومبايلرز. هذول ايش بيساعدونا على انه نعمل تيست للاونلاين هيلب سيستمز، وبنعمل discover اذا في عندنا for example incomplete link او missing reference على link او any type of error موجود بالاونلاين help system. الفيز نمبر 6 اللي هي conduct reviews and tests. في عندنا different type of tests، وبالالفا درافت غالبا اللي بيقوم بالتست هم المانجرز clients and اليوزرز. والفيدباك اللي بنحصله that we receive we can use it to make corrections and improvement على الدوكيومنت. Testing the online help system is usually done after the whole system is completed. لأنه مثل ما حكينا في عندنا links، في عندنا interconnected parts، فإذا ما كان السيستم كامل ما بنقدر نعمل تيست لهاي ايش؟ interconnected parts. Phase number 7, revise and edit. Now, the comments that we got or the feedback that we got from the reviewers, we have to incorporate into the document. أي comment أو أي feedback بنحصله من اليوزر بنحاول إيش نعدله على الدوكيومنت directly بحيث so it can be improved. In addition, an editor can verify the document for accuracy and organization. إضافة للإيديتس اللي بنعملهم من الريفيورز في دائما الجوب للإديتور بحيث إنه يتأكد إنه الدوكيومنت accurate، إنه الأورجنايزيشن اللي صح، إنه that matches the company organization or rules. Number 8, write a final draft. We don't write a final draft. Actually, the activities done in the previous 2 steps will help to greatly improve the document and وهذا اللي بنسميه الفاينل درافت. Now بما انه كان عندنا بنمبر بفيز نمبر 5 الفيرست درافت، نمبر 6 we did reviews، نمبر 7 شو اللي عملنا incorporating للريفيوز وللكومنتس وعملنا editing للدوكيمنت، فالريزلت برودكت هو اللي بيكون عباره عن الفاينل درافت. The end result should be a camera ready or final draft or online help that is ready for distribution with the program، وهذا اللي بنسميه الفاينل درافت، هذا الكاميرا ready. Number 9, after we're done with the final draft, number 9 is conduct a field evaluation. The best evaluation you have to do or you done when you test a document in the user environment. The field evaluation done by users and operators of the programs allow you to judge how your product will fit the needs of the intended user. لأنه بنعمل testing inside document او inside environment تبعت اليوزر. Any information او any comment بنحصلها during الفيلد evaluation will be input for the next project. راح تساعدنا على انه نعمل ايش improvement للنكست ريليز من الدوكيومنت تبعتنا او للنكست project. Project types. We have two types of project: standalone documentation project and development documentation process. Standalone is one for which the writer is assigned or contracted to develop documentation for a program that has already been written. فهون writer is not involved in the development process for the software. The writer needs to learn the entire program before having to write about it. However, they have no input into the user analysis or the design of the document. بما انه الرايتر مش involved بالdevelopment process للسوفتوير they will not have any input or any comment during عملية user analysis or during عملية design للproject. Their only job is to create the document after they try to understand the whole program. The second type اللي هو development documentation process is more common in organizations that create software as their main products. شركات كبرى زي المايكروسوفت or whatever هذول بيكون في عندهم development team and a writer is part of this team. Processes are in place for creating both of the software and documentation side by side. High companies, they create a software with document together at the same time in parallel. So writers can be involved in the project from the beginning and can provide input into the usability and interface of the project. The writing usually parallels the design of the product. فهون بالحالة هاي الرايتر هو عبارة عن part from the team and will be involved in the documentation and development process at the same time. فهو راح يكون له input بيأثر على عملية اليوزابيلتي والانترفيس للبروجكت وللدوكيومنت at the same time. Functions of the documentation plan. Why we build a documentation plan, or what are the benefits from the documentation plan? Here we mention two benefits. First, managerial, and second, persuasive. Managerial. It allows users to schedule tasks and people, keep track of document files, records, and anticipate important meetings. It also allows us to monitor progress and make concessions when necessary. فهون المين idea او المين benefit from it انه بتساعدنا على انه to manage our project and help us to schedule and check deadlines meetings فحتى يكون عندنا at the end successful project. The second thing, persuasive, it helps us to persuade or to convince somebody by that this project will be successful or give us present a sensible design, show willingness to cooperate, indicate talents and capabilities, and appear dependable. Documentation process. The goal of the process is to tailor the manual and the online help to the user needs with great precision. الهدف الرئيسي من ال following in 9 phases أو the 9 phases process حتى نقدر نتمكن من إنه إيش to adapt المانيوال أو نخلي المانيوال يتكيف مع احتياجات اليوزر أو مع اليوزر needs. In order to achieve this goal, we use models to see the interaction of variables in the document design. We deal with two models. First model, we call it a task list, which is the model of the system. The second model, user analysis, which is the model of the user. and we mean by the model of the system the list of the tasks that we need to perform, and model of the user means the user analysis, or like the set of needs that need or tasks that need to be performed by the user. Combined together, they give the user a clear direction in the design of the document. بشكل عام حتى نقدر نخلي الدوكيومنت adapt to the user needs، we have to depend on two models. اول موديل اللي هو التاسك ليست، وهذا التاسك ليست بيحتوي على كل التاسك اللي الموجوده بالسيستم and that the system offers for us. The second thing اللي هو الموديل of the user، والموديل of the user بيعتمد على اليوزر analysis and will give us the set of tasks needed by the user or the user usually perform. If we combine them together بكون عندنا clear picture عن طبيعة الديزاين والاوتلاين للدوكيومنت تبعنا. The process follows in 9 phases, each building on the previous one. مثل ما حكينا سابقا انه كل واحدة من هذول الفيزز ال9 phases بتعتمد على اللي قبلها. فور اكزامبل حتى اقدر اعمل editing I have to have الفيرست درافت، وحتى اقدر اعمل الفاينل درافت I have to have editing and reviewing before that. I can't do field evaluation unless I have الفاينل درافت. كل واحدة منهم بتبني على الثانية and each implying testing procedure and management checkpoints. وبكل واحدة من هذول الفيزز في عندنا procedure to make check for the management and rules. All these steps and process creating the document goes around the workplace task and specify the user analysis and user scenario. In software development, there are 3 main methodologies we use. خلال development بنستخدم 3 methodologies. الفير methodology اللي هي الووتر ميثود، الرابid development method اللي هي بنسميها البروتوتايبنج، and الاوبجكت modeling method. هذول ال 3 methods اللي هم الميثودولوجيز اللي بنستخدمهم while we are following the development process للدوكيومنت. Documentation plan. The definition or general definition the documentation plan is a written document describing a manual or help system for a software program containing specification for the document and plan for creating it. فإذا بنطلع على الديفينيشن بتكون from 2 parts. الفيرست one اللي هو content specification، والسكند thing البلان for creating it. ومثل ما حكينا سابقا انه any documentation plan بتتكون من either development plan اللي هي content specification او البروجكت بلان اللي هي المانجمنت issues او المانجمنت rule. Documentation plan. It provides guidelines and directions for the technical writers as they create user-centered documentation. Following are some basics to writing a documentation plan. كل واحد من هذول البيسك هو عبارة عن element or feature need to be available in any documentation plan. The first basic أو first element اللي هي overview of the product or the project. In this section we try to introduce the product that is currently being developed, or in general we try to answer some of the question: what it is, what it does, and how it can be used. These are, if we answer these questions, we can show the overview of the product. The second guideline is the purpose of the documentation. In general, we have to answer the question: what are we trying to accomplish with this documentation? ايش البيربوس؟ ايش الغاية من بناء هذا الدوكيومنت؟ Are we going to, for example, to teach, to guide, or as a reference? It's important to have a sense of purpose and directions for the documentation. Examples of the purposes include, for example, minimizing tech support, improving user experience, and providing more procedural help. فمن الغايات او من البيربوسز اللي ممكن نبني السيستم او الدوكيومنت علشانها اللي هو ممكن نستخدمه so we can minimize the technical support or minimize the user's need for the technical support. For example, if we want to improve user experience and improve their quality and productivity for more help and so on. Guideline or element number 3, identifying key contacts. Who are the contacts? Means identifying everyone on the development team so that everyone knows who's responsible for what. And the key contacts can be project manager, content experts, marketing manager, product support engineers, and technical writers. فبالستيج نمبر 3 او الستيب نمبر 3 بنحاول نعرف who are the stakeholder، مين الانفولد بالدوكيومنتيشن process والرول or job for each one of them. Element number 4, defining a target audiences. It's important to know who the target audiences or users are. Knowing who will be using the product will help you, the technical writer, as well as the content expert, to structure, organize, design, and create a user-centric documentation and product. اذا عرفنا مين التارجت اودينس هذا بيساعدنا على ان نعرف ايش طبيعه الدوكيومنت اللي بدنا نعمله، ايش نوع الدوكيومنت، بالاضافه الى انه بتساعدنا على انه how we do the structure, الاورجنايزيشن، الديزاين، بحيث انه يطلع عندنا user centered documents. Element number 5, identifying risks and challenges. Any documentation process faces some kind of risks and challenges. So a good plan needs to be able to first identify risks that might occur, as well as have plans to mitigate the risks. فهنا in general we have two things we have to follow. First, we have to follow the risk prediction approach, and second thing, we have to risk mitigation or plan to avoid a risk اللي هو بنسميه risk avoidance. What kind of risks that might happen during the documentation process? For example, unexpected delays, time constraints, inexperienced writers, vacation, holidays, maternity, health-related issues. All of these are examples of an issues or an risks and issues that might affect the quality and outcome of the documentation، وهذا بينعكس عليه انه it might lead to a risk to the project or documentation failure. Number 6, defining the deliverable. Now we have to define what type of document is needed. This thing depends on the 3 elements we mentioned first اللي هم overview of the product, purpose of the product, and key contacts. بهذول بيحددوا شو طبيعة deliverable. Again, in order to define ايش طبيعة deliverable او ايش نوع documentation type that we wanna produce، هذا بيعتمد على 3 things. Overview of the project اللي هي number 1, purpose of the documentation number 2, identifying key contacts اللي هي number 3. Knowing the purpose of the documentation, identifying who the target users are, and understanding the nature of the product. هذول هم 3 elements اللي بيعتمد عليهم أو 3 things that might affect or define طبيعة deliverable. The types of documentation include online help, print documentation, embedded help, conceptual help, procedural help, and video tutorials. Element number 7, creating a documentation schedule. Part of the documentation plan is knowing how the documentation schedule fits in with the project schedule and the product. Any technical writer needs to know how much time she has to do research and when most of the content should be written. There should be enough time for the documentation to go through several rounds of reviews. Why create a documentation plan? Documentation plan can be used for many reasons. First reason, plan ensure strategic use. You need to follow a process which meets some requirements to make it in today's competitive business world. You need to defend it in meeting, explain it clearly, justify it, research and refine it in discussion. One of the reasons we use is documentation plan حتى ايش حتى try to compete with the world so we can guarantee that we are using our software in a strategical way. Second thing, plan saves money in the long run. User have to make fewer support calls. They waste less time searching through resource document. They make fewer mistakes. In general لما تكون في عندنا good documentation plan التيم members أو اليوزرز اللي موجودين بالتيم أو the people who are working in the project رايحين each one will know their job فهذا بيقلل عدد ايش support calls بيعمل lists waste للتايم searching للresources وللdocument وللpeople who are like responsible about each task وهذا كمان بيخلي عندنا fewer mistakes. Following with why we create a documentation plan. Planning derives a discussion about the content, audience and deliverables. In each plan احنا بنحاول نعمل like the discussion او we try to describe ايش التوبكس ايش السبيسيفيكيشن مين الاودينسز تبعونا what we are trying to deliver. A plan can provide more than just a set of deadlines. As we said, the documentation plan either will be content specification or like the management issues. Set the directions and make sure everyone knows what they need to do to get there. لما حكينا عن التاسك شيت او التاسك ليست شيت حكينا انه for each task ببين عندنا who is responsible about finishing this task or who is involved in each task. Derive discussion around deliverables and audiences of the information. Also, revisiting your plan through the project will help keep you from losing sight of the wood for all these trees. هذا بيساعدك على انه دائما تكون على اطلاع او tracking جميع الاكتيفيتيز اللي related للبروجكت if you have plan. You can check or know which tasks are done, which task in progress, which task is not finished yet, and so on. Make the documentation plan persuasive. In order to make the communication plan, you have to persuasive. You have to communicate with others not familiar with the documentation process, such as clients and sponsors. You do not want them to be surprised when it comes time for them to review or participate in testing. But in general, making a documentation plan persuasive لازم تخلي اليوزرز involved بالبروسيس بحيث انه يكونوا على اطلاع بكل الاكتيفيتيز اللي بتصير. So when you want to use them to test or review your document ما يكونوا surprised. They will be familiar with what you are doing and already have feedback about it. Your documentation plan doesn't just set what you want to do. It can get you the contract or the project. Both of these roles political and managerial. احنا حكينا انه documentation plan مش هي بس اللي بتخليك تعرف what you want to do. كمان ممكن تكون your way to sign the contract, your way to win the project. Okay. فبكل الحالات هاي both of those two roles is either the tell you what you want or get you to sign the contract. هذول عبارة عن political and managerial issues or strategies to make the documentation plan persuasive. A persuasive plan will cause your reader والreader هون بنحكي فيه إما الكلاينت أو السبونسر أو المانجر to believe that the project will fulfill its purpose and they should invest their time and money in it. You will not be able to convince الريدر تقنع الريدر بانه هذا الدوكيومنت او هذا البروجكت رايح يلبي احتياجاته او الغايه from it unless you convince them with that, unless you make the plan persuasive. فلازم نبني بلان بحيث انها تكون مكتوبه بطريقه تكون مقنعه للريدر. الفاكتورز او الثينجز اللي لازم نستخدمهم حتى نقدر نقنع اليوزر. First you have to use an executive summary, and here we mean give them the bottom line before to start so they can put toward your project. اعطيهم المين idea about the project so they can be convinced. Have a goal oriented, set out objectives the reader can identify. خلي الاوبجكتيف والجولز تبعونك واضحين بحيث انه الريدر can understand them and believe them. Third thing, do math, budget figures. Now, one of the things that the managers or readers or the client sponsors they care about هو البادجت. Try to convince them by calculating or doing the math, putting the numbers so they will be convinced about your plan. Show the team orientation. Show them that there will be team orientation. What is the role for each one? Emphasize your contribution and value to the project. وضح your role. حاول تظهر الرول تبعك بالبلان وايش الرول اللي بيقوم فيه كل واحد من التيم members. It's strategies to make documentation plan easy to follow. فهون بالبداية ركزنا على انه persuasive. Now how we can make it easy to follow. In order to make the documentation plan easy to follow, first, standardize your terminology. That means use standard terms. التيرمز الكيوردز اللي بتستخدمهم حاول تستخدم standard keyword على طول الدوكيومنت بحيث انه يكونوا اليوزرز familiar with them. Don't use ambiguous terms. Clarify the interconnectivity of information units. Make the information sharing clear to the right. Now إذا في connectivity between the topics, try to make it إيش more clear. حاول إيش تعمل عملية الشيرنج للinformation or information delivery easier between اليوزرز أو reader. Include sample pages. حاول تلاقي أي sample page, templates, standards, whatever from the field environment حاول تعمل له include بالdocument تبعتك so that you make a link between the environment و between الdocument تبعك. Put as much well considered detail into your outlines as you can so the logic of the document appears clearly to the writer. حاول دائما حط the much details that you believe is enough for your reader. On much of details depends on the type of user and how much knowledge they have. Documentation plan. We said that the documentation plan consists of two parts. First اللي هو project plan والsecond اللي هي design plan. The project plan, how you will produce your manual. The schedule, resources, and time estimates. Basically هون بالproject plan we focus on the managerial issues or management issues. ايش schedules, the times needed, the time estimation to finish each task, who are responsible in each task, ايش resources needed, and so on. The second thing اللي هي as we said the design plan, and with the design plan what your manual will contain. ايش التوبكس اللي رايح يحتوي عليهم الدوكيمنت. What kind of task need to be included in your document. ايش التاسك اللي رايحين نغطيهم بالتوبكس تبعنا بالدوكيمنت. And what they will look like. هنا basically we focus on the design issues. الforms, الlayouts, language, graphics, and so on. Mainly هون بالdesign plan we focus on what we call content specification. What goes in the design plan. بهذا السلايد راح نركز على الأشياء اللي ممكن يحتوي عليها الديزاين بلان. First, description of the user from analyzing your user. In this thing we will try to include ايش التاسك وايش الاكسبرتيز, what kind of knowledge our users have. The second thing, description of documentation goals and objective. فبنحكي in general على ايش الاوبجكتيف والجولز from writing this kind of document. And if we go more specific in terms, what are the overall goals? What kind of goals for specific users? Goals for a specific section or document. Number 3, description of the manual type. What kind of types we documents that we are trying to create should describe in detail the content and layout of the document and tie the design clearly to the goals and user description that preceded. فمعناته هنا نمبر 2 حددنا ايش طبيعه الجولز والديزاين والاوبجكتيفز سواء كان general or specific sections. When we try to do design in number 3, we'll try to tie the design to the objectives we created here or we defined in number 2. Number 4, for description of the content of the layout and outlines. This includes one section for each individual document, while the section بيحتوي على name, number of pages, and so on. Second thing, layout should contain enough details. So if someone has to read your plan, he or she could complete the documentation set exactly the way you planned it. فلازم تكون عملية اللي والdesign element واضحة بحيث إنه you can follow the process easily without any following with what goes in the design plan. If we want to specify the layout for our document, we have to include some specific elements. من هاي element, for example, the page size, the column specification for all page styles لازم يكون for example we have to define it. A table specification for all the tables. If we are using tables or if we have tables in our document, we have to define the specification for all the tables and their format. Text style, size, and font, bold, italic, regular, or whatever. وهي بنسميها the queuing patterns. Also, the style specification for headings, task names, and the steps also need to be clear. البوكسينج specification, all these elements or factors هي بتكون او هي اللي بتكون الكونتنت specification او الديزاين للدوكيومنت تبعنا as we know. Online help development process. What do we mean by online help? Online help is a document that is delivered as a software using HTML or any other language or PDF. In the development process for the online help goes through 4 stages. First, identify and list the topics. And when we say list topics such as steps for performing a procedure, command with an example of how to use it, definition of a term relating to a program. Once you identify the topics, now you have to put them under categories such as procedures, steps or step-by-step sequences, shortcuts, key combination, and this will help us to save the user time. We can put them, for example, as frequently asked questions, glossary terms, menu command, explanation of items or program menus. مقصود هون انه بعد ما نعمل identification ونحدد طبيعة التاسكس or topics that we want to include بالاونلاين help, لو ممكن يكون عبارة عن steps, commands, definitions and so on, بنحاول نحطهم بجروبز, وهاي الجروبز ممكن تكون either procedures, frequently asked question, glossary terms or menu commands. The second step will determine the interconnected elements. When we say define connections between topics or terms. Interconnections make up the heart of a help system. Thanks to the hyperlink, which make it's so easy to leap from topic to topic in an online help documentation. بأني online help documentation most important thing هو hyperlinks أو interconnection بين any topic with other topic. Okay, فناو we have to after بعد ما حددنا التوبكس وحطيناهم بجروبس. Second, we have to define ايش طبيعة connections between التو أو between التوبك. Step number 3 of the online help development process: decide what software capability to use. Now we wanna define a design format. For example, do we wanna use hyperlinks, pop-ups, buttons? كلهم هذول عبارة عن design and format things we use in order to be able to design an online help system. Phase number 4 or step number 4: select a development method to construct the system. هون وصلنا للمرحلة الرابعة اللي هي الكونستراكشن. Once you have selected the information for the topics and decided what technical capabilities to use to present the user, you have to turn to the construction of the system. فناو بعد ما حددنا طبيعة الديزاين، حددنا طبيعة التوبكس، لازم ننتقل لإيش؟ للكونستراكشن إيش phase. Remember, a help system uses screens and software rather than pages to present the information. It could get complicated.